Welcome to Deer Feet. I'm Renee.
And I'm Jess.
And we're the Deerfoot Sisters. Today we're talking about toxicity.
Yeah, what are toxic people?
Jess, I have to tell you, before we get started, I almost just said, I'm Jess.
You wish.
And I also really wanted quickly, before we start today's episode, to talk about a story that I wanted to tell last week in the Fear episode, and then I forgot to tell, and I just remembered last night. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the Fear episode. If you didn't, definitely check it out. First of all, I hope you don't get too scared when you listen, because I definitely got spooked out while we were making it, right, Jess? Just thinking about fear, because then even when the UPS guy came and the dog barked and she did that half bark and we both thought we heard a noise and we were both it's nothing. And I'm like, oh my god, it really probably is nothing. But since you keep all the blinds down, it wasn't even that late, but it was kind of dark in there. But whatever. And then when you were staring over my shoulder at what I thought was a demon materializing behind me. But the story I wanted to tell was the other night, a couple weeks ago, I was laying in bed and it was late. It was 12:30 or 1 in the morning. And I was awake. And I heard some people come behind. We live in an apartment and we live at the corner. So there's a wooded area sort of right behind and around the side of our apartment. So I heard someone back there in the wooded area and they were digging something. And I'm like, what are they? And it was just the scratching of the shovel, and it kept happening. And I'm like, what are they digging? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. This is really creepy. And I wanted to look out and see. But I was also scared that if I saw someone, they would just try to kill me because they're probably burying a dead body. So finally I was okay. I was I'm just going to try to go to sleep. And then right when I'm about to fall asleep, I feel something graze up my arm. And I'm like, oh my god. And I turn around. Turns out no one was outside. It was actually my window was open and my blinds were getting sucked in and out to the window. And then what I felt go up my arm was the cord to the blinds, because every time the blinds moved, the cord was going up and down, and the scratching was just the blinds scratching against my window. So I was so embarrassed because I was so scared, and I'm oh my god, you're such an idiot.
That's funny.
Yeah, so luckily no murderers, just ghetto blinds.
Yeah, something like that happened to me last night, actually. I went to bed really late because I'm not, I don't really have to be up early this week at all. So I went to bed around, 1 in the morning. And all of a sudden, then I heard something,
The dog is getting excited
playing with something, I guess. I heard, or something woke me up, with a start. Mm-hmm. And then I heard the dog. She has a chain collar, so I heard her chains rattling. What? Oh, there's a beetle. Oh. I was she's definitely interacting with something.
It's probably a
ghost.
Get
it, Sarah, get it.
What? Did she get it?
No, she goes to get it and then she gets scared of it. Okay, Sarah, leave it. Leave it. Leave it. She's no, I must protect you. It's my beetle or whatever it is. Pill bug or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, you can get it if you want.
No, I don't care. So the dog has it under control.
So anyway, then I was oh, it was nothing. Sarah must have just been doing something. But then again, I thought in my mind, I really kind of then was pretty scared, but I was what am I going to do? I was oh, just go back to sleep. If there is someone trying to murder you in the house, they'll probably be successful. I don't know why I'm so resigned to just be murdered all the time.
I guess you just figure there's not much you can do.
Yeah, I was just whatever.
What is happening? Okay.
But then I looked up and I saw that it was 1:15, and I was oh, I've been sleeping for 15 minutes. Because I really thought I was in a deep sleep in the middle of the night, but it was only 15 minutes later, and something she did just scared me. Anyway, so back on topic after that 4-minute detour into last week's topic.
Okay, Sarah, stop. The dog is sitting on its chair next to me trying to help us record the podcast. And she's ridiculous. Okay,
cute.
You're going to sit quietly. You can sit there, but I want more kisses. It's disgusting.
So this week we decided to talk about toxicity and specifically...
The taste of your lips, I'm on a red.
You're right? Toxic. Oops. Although, that would actually be a fun thing to do. Later in the episode, we'll talk about if you do have toxic people in your life, how to deal with them. And I do think a great way to deal with them would just be start singing that song in their face.
Just singing Britney Spears all the time. That would make you into, a toxic person. If you just were consistently singing Britney Spears at people.
At people, yeah.
Who weren't asking for it.
But who's, like, ever not asking for it?
True.
I mean, come on.
Like,
Britney's the best.
That's true.
It's Britney. Anyway. So, how would you define, like, a toxic person?
I think it's interesting. I feel like the term, even, like, toxic person has, like, gotten a much bigger following in the last, like, few years, right? Like, I don't really feel like growing up you really heard so much, like, oh, that person's toxic. It's kind of one of those new phrases, like, triggered or, like...
Well, I think it's more, like...
It's more just, like, people talk about it and don't put
psychology
up with it.
And, like, personal wellness and finding your joy and finding your inner peace has become much more, like...
Mainstream.
Yeah, cool to do. Mm-hmm. And even just, like, going to therapy is something that's, like, it's more accepted and something that... Like, so people used to probably just... have really bad interpersonal relationships and they were just dealing with it and they were like, whatever, that's life, that's how it is.
And they're like, that's just how, like,
my dad was a jerk to me,
so
I'm going to be a jerk to my kids, which is always like a weird
thing.
Reason to be a jerk. I'm kind of like, but didn't you not like it?
Did you enjoy that? Was that a good childhood? Yeah, I think being toxic is really just, I don't know, like, I think the best way for me to recognize when someone's toxic is that I just feel so drained being around them. Like, emotionally drained, or you always have that, like, feeling of apprehension when you're near them, like, something is going to, what?
I don't know. I think she saw, like, the beads of condensation
on your drink,
running down my drink, because her eyes, like, widened, and she was like, oh, I see something.
Maybe
like,
the beetles in your drink. Anyway, so...
the beads of water.
So, yeah, I think it's, like, that feeling of just consistent, like, apprehension, like, you feel like you're always walking on eggshells, like, you never, there's, like, a volatility, like, you never know when they're going to be, like, a blow up, and it's just, like, it doesn't matter what you do, you know, you kind of never measure up to some image in their head, or almost, like, people who are toxic, they don't even want to be happy, they just want everyone else to be miserable with them. Yeah. So I kind of feel.
I just was interested in a second, like, what does toxic mean, like, the textbook definition or whatever, and it actually means poisonous, which, like, makes sense. Yeah. You know, like, that's what it means or whatever, but you always think of it in this more, like...
Oh, my God, stop.
Kind of way. But yeah, so it's, like, they're just basically poisonous people. They're people that, drain you for whatever reason. I don't know why people are toxic.
I don't know. I don't understand it. I mean, obviously there's some sort of deep-seated, like, psychological reasoning for why they're... What are you doing? Oh, my God. She's seriously climbing on the table. Get out of here. Okay.
Yeah, she has to...
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause for a second. Okay, we're back.
Everyone's okay. The dog just fell off her chair. Totally on her own. Definitely wasn't pushed by anybody. She's fine.
It's probably the beetle.
She's fine now. She's laying on the ground. She'll probably hear her later. Sorry, it's hard to have limited sound when you have a dog present.
A dog who's very aggressively affectionate.
Yeah. She's like the opposite of toxic. She's like, love me, love me, love me, love me. And I'm like, okay, I don't need your licks all over my body. That's gross. Like,
yeah.
Just relax. Okay.
And she has really small paws. So I was describing it to someone the other day, and I was like, it's like she's wearing stilettos.
Yeah, when she stands on you, because she got a fat body and little tiny paws.
Her paws are so small.
So the weight is not, like, evenly distributed. It's all in one little area on your leg, which she always likes to stand on.
She woke up this morning and then, like, got closer to me in bed, and my hand was kind of just, like, next to my body, and she laid her head down, and then she, like, pushed her nose right against my hand and just, like, slept like that, and I was like the bridge of her nose, and I was like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, that's cute.
It's like you just wanted to snuggle.
Yeah. All right, so hopefully she'll behave herself now.
Yeah, so anyway, for whatever reason, people, they have some kind of deep-seated, or they've been in this cycle of toxicity and they just can't get out of it, but it does seem sometimes like people want to be there. And I'm like,
yeah,
why?
I don't know.
Like, what? Like, we always have said to people, like, we have a low threshold for enjoyment because we enjoy enjoying ourselves. So we kind of, like, purposefully make sure that we enjoy ourselves most of the time because it's more enjoyable. I mean, it sounds so stupid. Like, saying it just sounds dumb, but it's really that simple. It's like, if if you would rather have a good time than a bad time, then make yourself have a good time.
Yeah, just, like,
find the good in it.
Anytime people ask me for my, one piece of life advice, which is often, since I'm such a guru, I always say to them, I say, try to find the good in every day. It's like, every day, there are things that aren't great about it, and there's also really nice things. So, like, whatever that may be, it might be really small, like, as small as walking out into sunshine, or, like, seeing a really cool dog or something, like something really small, but there's usually at least one good thing you can find. And if you focus on the good, then you don't notice the bad as much. And I think I read an article about, like, what makes happy people happy, and it's really, like, it is that choice of just deciding, I'm not going to focus on the negative things, I'm not going to focus on the things that are out of my control, I'm going to focus on the good things and just try to enjoy them the best I can, because there's not a lot of time here on earth. Even though I've heard people say life is short, but it's the longest thing you do. And I'm like, so dumb. I'm like, yes, okay, but it's still short compared to, forever time.
Still never long enough, I feel like. Most people feel, at least.
Yeah.
Some people disagree.
Some people are like, they feel like they've lived enough when they're like 100 something. But, yeah, so I'm like, either way, you want to enjoy your life. You want to have fun. So just try to make the best of every situation.
Yeah.
And also to remember, it sounds so corny, but, like, to count your blessings. But it is true. Like, there's so many, even days when I'm like, oh my God, it's so hard. Like, I'm struggling so much. And I'm like, okay, but at the end of the day, like, I have a roof over my head. I have food in my belly. I have a husband who I love. I have good friends, good family. Like, I'm really going to be fine. I said good family.
I deserve my own category.
I have a really annoying sister who I put up with.
Yeah, that's, like, the whole idea of positive psychology, and everyone, like, I don't even know, it's so trendy now to, like, do your daily gratitudes, but it's trendy because it works.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't, like, necessarily write down my gratitudes, but
you don't even have to write them down, like, thinking about them. Like, if you're even saying, if you're a person who says your one piece of life advice is to find the good in every day, I mean, that's basically the same thing as doing a daily gratitude. It's just being intentional about being grateful for what you have and for appreciating things. With gratitudes, like, they should be, I guess, like, specific and not, like, arbitrary, and also not manufactured. So it's kind of like, can be tricky, but it's sometimes just being, like, grateful, like, realizing the small thing that you could be grateful for.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah. But there's some ways that people can be toxic. So one thing that I find a lot is people being passive aggressive, which I just can't stand it.
Yeah,
like,
same.
If you want to be aggressive, just be aggressively aggressive.
Because it's like passive aggression is still pretty overt.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, it's not even really that passive because everyone knows it's there.
It's really obvious. It's just, like, very immature.
Yes, I agree. It's very immature. It's not healthy. It's not conducive to progress. Like, even if you're passive aggressive and then you end up getting what you want by being so, the people who give it to you are going to just be resentful. They're not going to be gracious about helping you or doing what you want, because they're just going to feel, like, resentful and manipulated.
Yeah, it's true.
Most people aren't dumb enough to, like, not notice when someone is passive aggressive.
So if people aren't aware, like, how would you describe passive aggression, or, like, what's an example of it?
That's, like, I feel like it's hard to think of an example.
So an example would be something like, if I'm really mad, this is, like, a kind of a basic example, but, like, if I'm mad that you didn't take the garbage out or something, and then I were like, and even if I just said, like, thanks for taking the garbage out, like, it was sarcastic like that, that would be, like, a passive aggressive.
Or, like, if you're mad I didn't take the garbage out when it was supposed to be my turn, so then when it's your turn, you just don't take the garbage out.
Yeah.
And then for, like, 3 weeks, the garbage builds up, and then I'm like, what's going on with the garbage? And you're like, well, you didn't take it out when it was your turn to take it out. And I'm like,
5 weeks ago.
I didn't even realize, Or, like, people just saying, like, they're fine and then slamming doors or stomping around or anything like that. It's like, okay,
Huffing and puffing.
Yeah. It's like, can we just talk about what you're really upset about? Or just freaking out about one thing when that's not really what they're angry about.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it is very exhausting.
Yeah.
To deal with passive aggressiveness. Like, I just can't handle it.
So it involves, like, a lot of snide comments, not, like, basically just not saying what you're actually upset about, but making a lot of snide comments or being, like, grumpy and, like, storming around, and then, like, also sometimes just being mean to the person that you're upset with instead of just trying to, like, work through whatever you're upset about.
Right.
And it's just not, it's not conducive to, like, healthy relationships or good communication. It's toxic, I would say.
Yeah, pretty toxic.
So, another kind of, I guess, like, issue that we were going to talk about is addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of time, people who struggle with addiction, they say, like, the first time that a user chooses to use, it's a choice. But then after that, they consider it's like a disease, and they don't have a choice anymore. They're lost to their addiction. So it's really, really hard to be the loved one of a person who's struggling with addiction. So whether it's, like, alcoholism or drug addiction, so
any kind of addiction. Even, like, compulsive gambling or compulsive lying, is that considered an addiction?
Maybe more it's a compulsive behavior. I'm not sure.
Yeah, compulsive shopping. Like, if there's people who, like, I don't know, buy, like, a million tons of things that they don't need. That's probably, like, an addiction.
Yeah, I think probably, that. So, yeah, those kinds of things, like, and it's really hard for the loved ones because...
But obviously drugs and alcohol is, like, probably the worst because those other ones, yes, they can ruin your financial life, but they probably aren't going to, like, lead to you dying. So people would probably consider that worse if you died.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, when you're living with a person who's, like, a drug abuser, they behave in a lot of ways that are toxic towards you. So they're doing a lot of lying, sneaking around, stealing, sometimes violence, like, all different stuff that's, like, very toxic, and it's really hard to, I guess, like, deal with it. So...
Well, it's very hard, too, because you obviously love that person, and you want to help them, and you want to help them get better, but a lot of times, there's just no trust anymore. And it's really hard because you look at them and you think, like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you doing this to our family?
Yeah.
And, like, what you said before, like, yes, it was a choice the first time, but it's not always a choice later, and that can be really hard to empathize with because it just seems so much like a choice. Like, just stop doing that behavior, just stop doing the drugs, just stop drinking, like, just go to rehab. But it's obviously, like, a lot more complicated than that, so.
That's true. And then the thing is, like, even, I think sometimes, though, like, it's almost... It's like, interesting because it's easier for people to get really upset with abusers. Mm-hmm. I mean drug abusers, not like not like physical abusers. But yeah, like with drug abusers, because I guess they can, like, really feel like it's this concrete thing that they can point to that the person's doing that's bad. Because then if you look at other people that are, like, constantly toxic and they don't, I don't want to say, like, drug use is a good reason, but it's almost like an explanation for that behavior.
Right.
And then there's a person who's just, like,
terrible
nasty
person
all the time, and you're like, what's your excuse?
Yeah,
like,
what's your reason for being so nasty? It's not the drugs, like, because, with,
and why do we look at that and think it's better for a person who isn't, like, under the influence of drugs or under the, like, control of drugs, like, being nasty all the time and doing all these horrible things, but it's okay for, like, a drug... Not it's okay, but it's more, like... Understandable.
And, like, yeah, because... What was I going to say? I don't even remember. Something. But, yeah, I agree. It's definitely true. And... Yeah, what I was going to say is, like, when people have family members or loved ones who are drug addicts, it's always, like... They're like, well, that's not my son. Like, this person isn't my child anymore. Like, the person they are on drugs isn't who they were. But then if you have someone who's just toxic without the drugs, it's like, well, that is just who they are.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's probably worse.
Well, some of it might, too, be, like, a lot of times people who are toxic, this is just getting on to, like, why are people toxic? A lot of it might have to do with some other, like, mental health issues they're having.
I feel like they must be.
They could be, like, depressed, and they could not even realize that they're depressed or have major depressive disorder or whatever. Which, I mean...
And narcissism.
Well, yeah. Some toxic people, I think, could just have narcissism, which I would say is they're probably not treatable. But I'll be more hopeful and say maybe they're just depressed and they can get on SSRIs or something.
I mean, I think it's there's definitely, like, different factors. Like, I think depression is definitely one. But I think in my experience with people who've been depressed, I mean, it obviously varies, but a lot of depression, I learned when I was depressed. My therapist talked to me, and he's like, when we're angry, we either exert that anger outwards, and that is in the form of violence or acting out or having, anger management issues, or we exert that anger inward, and that's like depression, where you're just like aiming all that anger at yourself, and that's kind of why you withdraw, and you like don't really see your own value, so you don't think you deserve the chances people give you. And there's obviously like there can be irritability with depression, but I think for a lot of people it would take too much energy to be that toxic if they're truly depressed, like majorly depressed. But I guess
if they're really depressed and a person that is with them or in a relationship with them of some sort doesn't understand it,
well, yes,
it could be a toxic relationship because the person who's not depressed doesn't know what's going on, and the depressed person isn't able to have like a healthy relationship with that other person typically. Right. So I mean, it could still be toxic, but it wouldn't be, I guess, as aggressive. Like the person being it
would be more like it's very hard. I mean, I've been on both sides because I've lived with depression, and I've also experienced depression in loved ones. So when you do experience it, it is so hard not to take it personally when you're like, you're always cranky, or you're withdrawing from me, or you're not interested in like, being with me romantically anymore, all these things. And then you're like, wait a second, like this isn't because of me, like that's their own issue. But obviously it's hard because in a relationship, if you're in a romantic relationship, but in any kind of relationship, there's a give and take. So if they're at the point where they can't give any, then it's, you're sympathetic, but it's also very hard because ultimately you need some support yourself.
Plus, it's also like, at what point are you responsible? Like, I know that if you're married, like you say that you're going to be together till death do you part, but it's like, what if you're not married? And then it's or even if you are, like, if someone is sick, and I get that you should be compassionate, but if they're, at like what point do you have to stay if it becomes too much? Like, it's like, are you responsible for staying with that person? Like, if you're no longer getting what you need out of the relationship and you've tried and tried, it's like, do you have to stay with someone that's not fulfilling your needs or that is even being toxic towards you?
Right. And
even
it's very
if
hard.
It's based on like a disease they have. I mean,
that's why it's so sad. Like,
yeah.
Because I mean, definitely like I've had like some boyfriends who've like been through some parts of depression, and even like friends. Yeah. You try to involve them and get them into things, but it's kind of like they don't obviously want to, and then you're just like, okay, but like, are we still friends? Like, if I haven't seen you in 2 years, because you never come to anything I invite you to, or like you say you're gonna come and then you don't, or whatever it may be, and it's hard. But
yeah, and I think for us, like, we're always there for people, but it's like sometimes you have to say like, I'm still going to be there for you, but I'm not going to be, like, your wife anymore. Like, like, I'm not going to be, like, your girlfriend anymore if, or we're probably not best friends anymore. Like, I'm still going to be your friend, and I'm going to be here for you if you need me or you want to reach out again, or I'll reach out to you, like, again at some point. But, at some point you say to yourself, like, or you say to that person, like, I can't keep putting myself in this situation and hurting myself because I think that's what's really hard too.
Like, with depression, it's hard because it's just really sad. But like with other types of toxicity, like with narcissism, it's really hard for people to detach. So why do you think, or like, what do you think is the best way to exit from a toxic relationship?
I mean, I don't really know, because I'm trying to think, like, I feel like I'm pretty good at being assertive and kind of avoiding getting really too deep into toxic relationships. Like, sometimes I will, but I don't know. It's really hard once you get into it, but I think,
but what if it's like a family member?
If it's a family member, like, I think that it's best to, like, well, ultimately, like, I think you have, in any relationship, like, you have to say, what's your goal at the end of this? Like, if I know I'm never going to, like, not have that person in my life because that's just how my family is, or that's how I am, like, if there's a person in my family that I feel like I could detach from that person completely, and that might be the best thing for me or for other people as well, but if other people in my family disagree and it's going to then cause problems in my family if I do that, I have to make the choice. Would I rather get rid of that one person who's toxic, or would I rather deal with that person
and keep the rest of
it, like,
I mean, that's when I think it gets really hard, was when it's like a familial relationship. Because
Yeah.
obviously, if it's like a boyfriend, you can hopefully prevent it, or people can help you get out before it gets like too hard.
Yeah.
Or even a friend. But when it's like your family, especially if it's like a parent or, you know, or a brother or sister,
Yeah.
then it's really
Or
hard.
child.
Or a child, yes, that's true. I haven't had toxic children, so I don't have much experience with that.
Yeah.
My kid's pretty good, but yeah, because it's like I always like read on forums, like I read and people will like post questions like, oh, what should I do, blah blah blah, my mother's like toxic, or my mother-in-law, and they're like, cut them out, blah, and I'm like, okay, but like realistically in the real world, unless you're like an only child with no aunts and uncles and grandparents, like it's really hard to completely cut someone out of your life,
Right.
and it's just more complicated than that. Like
Yeah.
it's not always doable. And also,
think-
when it's like a parent, most people are still going to love their parents,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, like, if that's the type of living situation you grew up in, it's going to be really hard for you to even probably see enough worth in yourself to think, I deserve better than this. Because you were probably conditioned your whole life that this is the kind of love you deserve.
And it's also not even, sometimes it's not that they don't know that they deserve better. Sometimes the person, if it's their own parent, they think they just keep waiting for their parent to like love them the way they think they should,
Right.
or to be like proud of them. Like, I mean, you always hear that like in movies or even in just people being like, I want my dad to be proud of me, I'm just waiting for my dad to be proud. It's like, he's never going to tell you he's proud of you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you're only hurting
65,
yourself.
move on with your life.
You're only making it worse for yourself by continually waiting around for that to happen. And you just keep, and I don't want to.
It's so hard.
I'm not the kind of person who tries to tell people set your bar low so you're never disappointed. I don't think that's the point. But there's a point where you have to realize, I'm never getting what I want out of this person, and it's just draining me emotionally and hurting me emotionally to keep thinking I might get it and to try to set myself up like I might get it. So I think if you have to deal with family, you have to just sometimes realize like, this is what I get,
Right.
and you get like. You realize who the person is or where they're at, and you can try. I don't think that a person shouldn't try. I think that you should always try to move forward with like your relationship by having like open communication, saying how you feel, using I statements, like really just like the typical like therapist, I guess, like
Toolkit.
techniques. But basically just telling someone like, I always like to approach it of like, talking to a person like, I want our relationship to get better. How can we together make it better?
Right.
Because instead of going and attacking someone and being like, you're doing this, you're doing that, it's awful. It's like, approach it in the way of, I want us to have a better relationship. Do you want that? And most people don't turn around and say no.
Yeah.
And if they do, then you're like, okay, cool, bye.
All right, so this is.
But usually they'll say yes, and then that opens up the door for them to actually look more realistically about what maybe could change. And then they might give you some ideas about stuff, and it's best to, I think, just be open to it, because then you can see that, like, you can both work together to make it better. And sometimes you'll work and nothing will get better. The same things will keep happening, and you're beating a dead horse by talking about it. So at that point, I'm like, don't talk about it anymore. Just realize that's what you get with that person.
Right.
And you
This
have
is
the
what it
choice
is.
to not interact with them anymore. And that's something that you can totally choose to do. But you have to then realize that there might be consequences attached.
Right.
So if you don't want to deal with the consequences attached, and you're going to end up having to deal with that person, then I would say armor yourself in a way so that you can deal with them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's definitely the case. And a lot of it's just like, you need to just learn not to take things personally. Like, if you see that someone's toxic, you need to know that's not me, that's them. And if they choose to be that way, that's how they're going to be. And I will try my best to deal with them. But, like, at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. And to try and just not to take it personally and not let it get to you. And then just, you know, vent to your friends about, like, what a jerk that person is, and be like, oh, they're so bad, and then you'll feel better when everyone validates that you're right. And of course they do say, like, setting boundaries. So, like, you know, I was reading on one of the forums about, like, a mother-in-law, and basically they were like, well, just, like, say to them, like, if they're engaging in a behavior you don't like, just say, like, I'm not gonna sit here and listen to you talk to me that way. Yeah. So you can either apologize, or I'm going to leave today and I'll come back tomorrow, or I'll come back another day, next week, whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm just letting you know that I'm not going to put up with that. So say what you want to say, but if you want me to be here or to spend time with you or to help you with whatever, don't talk to me like that. And I'm like, that's pretty fair. Excuse me.
I know that you had also mentioned something to me like a few years ago about how to deal with passive aggressive people that you would have read about.
Yeah, so what I've read was to be happy and stupid. So,
what does that mean?
So being happy just means like never kind of letting the person get under your skin and just always like being very nice. Like, oh, hi, how are you? How's your day? Like smiling. And then the stupid part is like not, if they're doing something passive aggressive, act like you don't notice it and just be oblivious. So then if they want you to actually notice what they're doing, like notice what's upsetting them, they have to tell you. Because you'll just be like, oh, or they're like stomping around and you're like, oh, are you okay? Like, do you want me to get you a new pair of shoes? Like, that sounds uncomfortable, or, you know, something, which actually in and of itself is kind of passive aggressive. But I feel like it does work because it's basically just like saying, like, I'm not going to be manipulated by you and I'm just going to be a nice, happy person. And it's usually hard for most people to continually berate happy, nice people. So if you're just like trying to be helpful and doing what you're doing, then they're probably not going to like continually just bash on you because they're going to realize like, okay, that person's actually really helping me. But it does seem to work in my experience.
Interesting, yeah.
And it depends. Like if your own interpersonal relationships, like I think it's important, like you were talking about good communication and just learning how to fight effectively, because obviously arguments happen in every relationship and there's like some ways that you can communicate effectively and reach a goal, and other times you're just fighting to fight, and that's like obviously not very healthy.
Right.
So because I used to always like say, even with my husband, I'm like, oh, you know, we never really had like big like huge fights, like, you know, because you always like see in movies like the couples that scream at each other and fight and they're like so passionate, and I'm like, we never really had that. And I'm like, oh, but like we definitely do have fights, but we just don't get to that point of like screaming and throwing things around the room, because we usually see what the problem is and then address it calmly and have open communication.
Yeah.
So like I'm like, oh, so I guess it's like we're still doing the fights, just not in that like theatrical way.
Right.
Which is good.
Exactly. I mean, I think with the passive aggression thing, like I get what you're saying. Like I don't know if I would necessarily handle it in that exact way of like,
I think it's more of like
passive aggressive. I think it's more like if someone was like, oh, I can't believe like with the garbage thing, like, oh, thanks for taking the garbage out, and you're like, oh, was it? Like, maybe you weren't even supposed to take the garbage out, or you didn't realize. And you could say something like, oh, was I supposed to take the garbage out? Like, I'm sorry I didn't take it out, or whatever. And I think it's just more like being very, like you said, not letting them get under your skin, and instead of reacting, just responding in, like, a more neutral way, or, like, a positive way.
Oh, sorry about that. Also, because I feel like people who are toxic, like, they'll, like, get so upset about things that, like, aren't important.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. And then if you just put it into perspective, then they're like, oh, okay, maybe they'll see, like, oh, why am I so angry about this?
Yeah, if you're just like, oh, I'll get it now, and then you do it, and they're like, thanks, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, like, could have just asked me to do it, and I would have just done it.
Yeah, something like that. Like, it's just, it's interesting, but.
Yeah.
I think with fighting clean, it's so interesting, because I feel like most people
are not good
like
at it.
The vast majority of people are really bad at fighting. They fight so dirty, and they just, what it means basically is when you're having a fight with someone where it's basically going to be some kind of disagreement and you're arguing about it, and it could result in yelling or not, but if you end up saying stuff you don't mean. Is Kay here?
I don't know, is she coming here?
She might have been dropping off the baskets or whatever.
Oh.
If you end up saying stuff you don't mean, then it's probably a dirty fight.
Pause. Hold on, dog.
One more detour. Okay, we're back again. I don't know what the dog was barking at. Phantom people or something.
Yeah, she's crazy. Okay, lay down. Relax.
So, anyway, I was just saying, like, if you're having a fight with someone and you end up saying something you regret, something you don't mean, then you probably have an indication that you did not fight clean. Right. So, fighting clean just means being intentional about what you're saying and having the goal of your argument to be a resolution.
Right.
If the goal of your argument is to just make the other person feel bad, first of all, you should be like, why are you even in a relationship with this person? If you want to make them feel bad, you probably shouldn't, like, that's not healthy, and why is the person in a relationship with you? Or to just prove yourself right. It's like, who cares? At the end of the day, like, your goal should be to have a better relationship with that person and to come to whatever resolution about whatever you're arguing about in the first place is.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, like, when people fight dirty, one thing that they do a lot is, like, bringing up past experiences that don't necessarily, like, past transgressions that don't really have anything to do with, like, the current situation.
Right.
Like, obviously, if you're trying to express, like, a pattern, you could be like, okay, but I want you to, like, I want to look at some times where we've seen this same behavior before, and, like, that's one thing. But a lot of times it will just be like, well, not only did you forget to do the laundry, but remember that time 6 years ago when you said this thing? Like, okay. Right. Like, okay, well, you can't just, like, every time we fight, bring up every single thing I may have done that's been disappointing or bad, because how are you ever supposed to move forward? Like,
plus, it also depends. Like, if it's a thing that you did in the past that you then talked out and you forgave the person and you've moved on, then you need to move on from it. You can't continually bring it up because I remember, it's not really fair.
There was, like, an episode of Desperate Housewives where this, like, happens, where, like, Lynette, who's, like, played by Felicity Huffman, who's, like, now in trouble, she was, like, having a fight with her husband because her husband had, like, had an affair, like, way before, but they had, like, a kid from it. And so she was, like, basically chose to forgive him and, like, still stay married, but then she would always say stuff, and he's like, you either forgive me or you don't. But he's like, but if you don't, tell me so that we can, you know, move forward separately. But he's like, you can't say you forgive me and then hold it over my head all the time. And I'm like, that's so true, because ultimately it becomes your responsibility. Oh, now the phone's ringing. This is a very noisy episode.
Life. So, anyway, yes, that's true.
Yeah,
if you're going to forgive someone, you should forgive them and let it go.
Right. And then also, like, another TV show that always was kind of funny to me is, like, in Dexter. Like, Dexter has a girlfriend, Rita, and she basically, like, takes him to couples counseling, and she's, like, expecting, and he's expecting the counselor's going to, like, agree with everything she says. And she's basically like, he does this, this, and this. And then the counselor is like, well, it sounds like everything you're describing is how he has always been. She's like, so you knew who he was and what he was like when you got into this relationship. So what's making you think now that he's going to change every single thing? And Dexter was kind of like, oh, like, you're right. And I'm like, not to say that you shouldn't expect people to grow and better themselves, but yeah, why are you going to choose to be with someone if you dislike so many things about them initially? And, like, obviously then maybe that's not the best person to be with.
Right.
And when it comes down to things that, like, obviously Dexter's, like, a serial killer, but she didn't really know that at the time. But it's, like, it was more things like he keeps these weird hours because he's, like, always working, or, like, he values work over other things. And it's, like, that's not necessarily a negative. Like, a lot of people nowadays are more into work-life balance, and a lot of people think, like, being a workaholic maybe is a negative trait, but it's not necessarily. Like, some people are very passionate about their work.
Right.
And if you are someone who can't, like, live in that situation, like, anytime I watch cop shows and the wives are, like, always getting so upset, like, that the husbands are, like, working a lot or putting themselves in risk, and I'm like, why would you marry a police officer? Like, that's how they are. Like, that's how they're always going to be. So it's kind of like, you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and then you can expect people to work with you, but you also have to recognize their desires and their needs. It's not always, like, one way.
That's true.
I don't know.
So
think about it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think, like, some tips for making sure your fights stay clean is, first of all, avoid sarcasm. I know people are like, I know sarcasm is great, and it's very fun, and it's all good if you're, like, doing with friends, and it's all teasing, or what's the difference? Teasing and joking, I don't know, whatever. It's about intention. If you're doing it and you're just being fun with your friends, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're using it in a fight and you're trying to be mean, that's when it's not okay. And it's not useful. It's never useful in a fight.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's not useful when you're actually trying to come to a real solution. So avoid sarcasm. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. And then just really say what you mean. And also try to be open about what you can do differently. Because you can only control yourself.
Right.
So say what you're willing to do and what you might need from the other person, but then also understand sometimes that you're not going to get your way. You have to compromise.
Right.
And ultimately, like, you may decide that a fight could come to make the end of a relationship.
Yeah, of course.
But that's okay if you decide in that argument, like, this is what's best. Right. I don't think you should have a fight end a relationship because you have a horrible fight and you, like, say horrible things to each other. That's a stupid reason to end a relationship.
Yes, if you fight continually about the same issue and you realize, okay, this is an issue that we can't resolve, then obviously you're like, okay, maybe we need to part ways. But you don't want to just be like, we had a bad fight and I got really mad, or I hit that person and now we broke up. Like,
or even just friends. But I'm saying not even if you don't even think about if you have a fight and you can't resolve it, because you might be fighting wrong. Like, if you are having a fight and you're just doing it the wrong way and you can't come to a resolution, that you might just need to look at it in a different way and
or
maybe
seek outside help.
Talk to someone else. Yeah, get a mediator or something.
Yeah, a counselor.
Mediator? Is that what it's called?
Mediator,
counselor? Yeah, like have someone else come in and help you, like try to sort it out, because you probably can come to a resolution.
And to always try to see things from the other person's perspective.
Yeah, if you're like trying and you just realize like there's non-negotiables you both have, or you're not willing to like budge on one certain thing, and then you realize, okay, it's not a good fit for whatever reason, for this friendship or this lover relationship, whatever it is,
Yeah.
You just decide like that's fine, but approach it from like a mature way, because there's so many times, this is just like talking about friendship and like having healthy relationships. Like, I know so many people who have ended friendships or familial relationships even just over really stupid fights, like really dumb things.
Like, seriously?
And then like didn't see each other or talk to each other for years. And I think like, was that worth it? Like, how in your world did you think, yes, this one little thing that happened is worth me never seeing that person again?
Right. And a lot of that comes down to pride.
Yeah.
And it's just like, sometimes you have to say to yourself, even if you're not wrong, you have to recognize sometimes maybe that person just needs an apology from me.
Sarah, stop.
Or they need me to say, I'm really sorry that, this relationship broke down and I want to make it better. So is there a way we can move forward?
Yeah, or even just honestly, if it ever happens to you, think in your mind, even if you're prideful and you want to like stand your ground, say, is this worth losing this person over?
Right.
Because if the answer is no, then all you really have to do is go to that person and be like, this is not worth our friendship to me. This is not worth losing our friendship or losing our relationship over.
Right, like,
and that will usually start the healing process.
Yes.
Because the other person will be like, me either, duh. And then you just kind of like move forward and you realize the thing was really stupid that you were fighting about. Yeah. Probably. Or if it wasn't, you work it out.
I think that's definitely why, like, a lot of times, like, when good friends, like, live together and then they, like, end up hating each other or, like, not being friends anymore, because it is, like, really challenging to live with each other. But then you will probably ultimately realize, like, okay, a lot of this stuff I could have dealt with. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we shouldn't live together, but we should not be friends because of this.
Right, exactly.
So, that's definitely true, yeah. People hold weird grudges sometimes about stuff, and I mean, my whole philosophy on forgiveness is just like basically forgive everyone or try your best, because it really doesn't hurt anyone else but you if you don't forgive people.
And forgiveness is like, I think the main thing on how you can deal with toxic people is because like if you hold a lot of resentment towards those people and you don't forgive them, you're basically bringing their poison into yourself.
Right. And
it's like, I forget, I don't know, my mom would always say, like, not forgiving someone is like filling your own heart with hate or something. But it's like, it's so true. Like, it's
like a quote I read in like one of my agendas in like 8th grade. It was like holding a grudge or not forgiving is like holding onto a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at the person who wronged you.
Burning somebody else.
Yeah, and it's like
you're holding the hot coal with the
you're only
of burning
hurting
someone
yourself.
else, but you're burning yourself. Yeah.
So I'm like, that's a good point. And it's true. Like, I remember one time I was like texting this guy and he like said something stupid and I was like, oh, well, you said this mean thing. I was like, it's okay, I forgive you. And he's like, I don't remember apologizing. And I was like, you don't have to apologize to be forgiven. And he was like, that's really deep. And I was like, thanks, I'm basically a guru. You should listen to my podcast for all my life advice. But that was like a really long time ago. But yeah, like, I mean, that's really how I feel. Like, some people you're never going to get an apology from. And also, like, an apology to me, I'm not a big believer in needing to hear the words, I'm sorry. There's a lot of ways to show someone you're sorry, but a lot of people do feel like they need to hear I'm sorry before they can, like, forgive you. And I'm like, no. If I can see you're changing your behavior, I can see you took what I said to heart, or I can see that you're trying, then I'm going to forgive you.
Even
you
if
don't
you
need
don't.
to say you're sorry. You don't even need
that.
to admit you were wrong to me. You just need to, like... We just need to move on with our lives.
You can forgive the person even if they don't change. Even if they continue to do the horrible things, you can still forgive them.
Well, in that case, I would forgive and detach.
Yes, you don't need to stay in... You don't need to keep having a relationship with them, but you can just be like, I forgive you.
For what you've done.
You're okay. Yeah, and you're like... And then wish the best for them. Like, I'm not, like, I don't believe in revenge, and I think that's why I don't hold grudges, because I'm always just, like, looking for people to become better.
Right.
So whenever someone, like, wrongs me, I always think, like, oh, I really hope they learn
their lesson.
They learn their lesson, like, learn how to become a better person. Like, I don't think, like, oh, I hope they get theirs. I hope, like, I'm always like, oh, I hope they, like, realize that they really hurt me and they, like, don't do that to someone else. Yeah. Like, I'm like, it's so stupid, but that's what I genuinely feel.
Well, because it's true.
Because I'm like, I just want them to, like, not be such a bad person or to, like, not hurt other people. And also I'm like, I feel like people should constantly be getting better. And so another thing to think about. So then I'm like, okay, how can you tell if you're a toxic person?
Right.
It's hard to tell, I guess. I mean,
I wonder if it is. I mean, obviously we're not. Like, I don't think anyone would consider me, like, a toxic person. So I'm, like, 98% sure no one thinks I'm toxic. I'm, like, pretty nice and try to be helpful and, like, you know, be a good friend.
Yeah, but it's hard to, like, sometimes it might be hard. I mean, maybe other people know. They realize, like, I'm miserable and no, people don't like being around me. But I don't know if they actually
like, what are
realize
the warning signs? Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that I think could be kind of a warning sign, or could be leading you down a slippery slope, at least not for necessarily being toxic, but for being, like, difficult to deal with, or for being, like, a bad communicator or whatever, or not being, like, able to have, like, healthy relationships, is if you're a person who says something like, that's just the way I am.
Oh, yeah. I was, like, reading something about that the other day, that someone's, like, saying, like, that's just how I am, take it or leave it, is, like, a sign of immaturity.
Yeah,
because,
it's the
like,
most immature thing.
And there are definitely, like, and it's hard, because obviously, like, we're people who, like, we, like, don't care what people think about us, in terms of, like, being freaks and weirdos. Yeah. But, like, we do care what people think about us in terms of, like, if I did something that hurt someone, I'm going to really personally take that to heart, because that's never my intention. But, yes, I don't care if you think I'm, like, a weirdo because I, like to dance around in, like, Disney outfits, or dance around in, like,
not much
when there's no music playing and, like, embarrass you, or, like, pretend to eat an ice cream cone statue, like, and take lots of pictures of it, like,
or, like, hop around, pretend you're a frog next to a stream.
Yeah, whatever, like, that's fine. But when it comes to, like, if what I'm doing is offensive to you or hurting you, then obviously, like, I don't want to do that, and I want to change, and I would like to know. But yeah, that's the difference, I think.
And I mean, when people say that, I'm like, and then people are like, it's not immature, and I'm like, it isn't. It's, like, the most immature thing, because if you're a mature person, like, you understand that you can always become better. Like, even someone that's, like, an amazing person, or someone might be like, that's the best person ever, they can always become better.
Right.
And it's basically just, like, if you're saying, I'm just this way, and I'm not changing, and blah, 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 I'm fine the way I am, you don't like it, deal with it. It's like, well, you're not willing to, like, realize that you have room for growth.
Yeah, and you're not willing to realize, like, your choices affect others.
Yeah.
And also, ultimately, I feel like it's only going to hurt yourself.
And
there's, like, you were saying before, like, you don't believe in revenge, and, like, I don't believe in revenge either, but, like, I am a big believer in karma.
Right.
And, like, I feel like there is cosmic justice, and, like, there are times where terrible people sometimes stay terrible for a long time, but I do feel like eventually they get their comeuppance, like, at some point. Sometimes you just have to wait, like, a really long time, but, like, that's kind of what I always just think to myself, is, like, eventually their day will come where they'll, like, get put in their place, or something will happen, so they're not, because when you see, like, bad people succeeding, it's, like, very disheartening to think, like, that person's so mean, or they're so hurtful, and they're, like, having success at work, or they're doing whatever, and I'm like, but they don't deserve it.
But it also
like,
might just come from the fact that, like, we're very rich in the sense of, like, having a lot of really great relationships, like, really good friendships, really great family relationships, like, we have, like, really, really strong relationships with a lot of people, like, and an insane amount of people, really. I mean, we have each other, which is just, like, a great bond, the best. It's a very unique and, like, special bond. But we also, I know it sounds so weird, but it's true. Like, it's not like normal sisters or even, like, twins. Like, we're just very, very close.
I think, honestly, we're like twins.
I think we're closer than twins, though.
No, I don't think so. I think we're, like, on par with twins.
I don't know.
Like, I saw Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen the other day on a clip on YouTube from, like, Ellen. I was like, oh, yeah, we're like them, basically.
So we're basically twins. But we also are, like, really, like, we're close with our brother, we're close with our mom, we're close with our cousins, we're close with our, like, some, like, our aunts and uncles, you know, we're super close with a ton of our friends, like, we just have these really great, like, deep and, like, genuinely loving, like, there for you forever kind of relationships.
Right.
And you have to realize people who are like that, they don't have that.
Yeah.
Even if on the surface they have, like, these relationships, it's not like that. And so they're missing maybe a lot of fundamental part of life. It just
comes from insecurity.
Yeah.
And just, like, knowing that, like, we know that a lot of our friends are pretty much loving us unconditionally, and our family definitely does. So, like, we are very comfortable in being who we are because we know that at the end of the day, like, our friends are going to be there for us, our family's going to be there for us. If anything bad were to happen to us, we have a big support system in place. But yeah, I guess there are, like, a lot of people who really lack that, and that would obviously be very hard.
That's why they get pets.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about the other day, because I said I don't need a pet because I already have enough people that love me unconditionally. So I don't need a pet to tell me I'm loved.
Or a child.
Sometimes people have children
for that reason.
Yeah,
too.
That's true. Well, the poor children. Yeah. So I think, but I think yes, I agree in karma, and I feel also like people are always like, you guys are so lucky, but I think that's kind of like our good karma coming around.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, well, I know, and it's kind of funny. I think I might have mentioned this before, but, like, I used to always say to Tim, like, I would always tell him, like, listen, I know things seem hard right now, but, like, everything for me in my life has always worked out in the end. I'm like, well, not the end, obviously, I'm still alive, but I'm like, every, like, issue I've ever had has been resolved in a way that's been beneficial. So I'm like, it's okay, like, I believe there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, like, something good is going to happen that's going to, like, end this bad situation for us. And I was like, even I would give examples, like, when I was, like, younger and in school, and, like, had a report due and I hadn't finished it, and then, like, we'd have a sub that day, you know, or, like, same thing at work, like, I did blah, 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 or whatever, and then we have, like, a fire drill during, like, whatever time, you know, like, things just, like, random things would, like, always happen that would work out. Or, like, I was, like, one time walking and I was, like, gonna get some bagels, and I was remembering as I walked, they're like, oh, this place only takes cash, and then I found, like, $38 of cash on the ground, and I was like, oh, perfect. Like, you know, like, there's, like, very weird things that happen, and he's like, yeah, but then now he will say to me, like, well, you just are so lucky that everything works out for you, and I'm like, wait a second, though. Like, yes, I know that there have been times where, like, cosmically I've been blessed, but also, like, I do work very hard for my success as well, and, like, I think it's just that deciding to focus on the good, because obviously there's times where things have ended poorly for me, but I just, like, don't think about those times as much.
I think I also read something about this, and it was talking about optimists and just, like, positive people and how they notice those things more. So that kind of stuff actually happens to everybody frequently, but people don't notice it because they're, like, if you're a more positive person, I guess, you're more inclined to notice that stuff.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, everyone out there, look at your life and notice those little coincidences where things lined up perfectly for you.
Yeah.
Because most people always figure out the other way around.
Right.
Like of course I, like, forgot something at my house, and then I was 2 seconds later, and then I got in a car accident. It's like, you don't think about every day where you're not getting in a car accident because you leave on time or whatever. Exactly. So it's like, you know, you got to think about it both ways, because that kind of stuff is always happening. And I don't know if it's really I mean, it could be karma. Who knows?
Who knows? But whatever. It's
pretty
just
cool.
Kind of funny.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say one other thing, too. Like, I know you told me this once, Jess, that it doesn't matter how many people in a room feel a certain way. It only matters who feels the strongest. So, like, let's say you have a room of, like...
who's expressing it?
Yeah, who's expressing it. So, like, so there's, like, a room of, like, 10 people, and 9 of them are, like, at a level 8 happiness, right? But then the 1 is at, like, a level 10 unhappiness. Then that 10 is going to infect everyone else in the room and bring them down. So my philosophy is always, like, try to be the most happy in the room, just to make sure, like, if a vibe is low, you can change it, and it only takes one person to change it. You just have to really feel it.
Yep.
And I think this is definitely, like, I think at some point we'll probably take an episode on, like, summer camp.
Yeah.
But, like, definitely, like, in camp, like, the spirit of camp, and, like, when we would do our, like, training stuff, and, like, just getting really pumped up and, like, being goofy, and, like, even in my classroom, like, you know, you can really set the vibe if there's just one person who's, like, negative or one person who's really positive. So just try to be the happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
And then...
So if you find yourself usually being the person that people are, like, saying, oh, you're such a negative Nelly, or
like,
gills,
not wanting to be around.
Or, yeah, like, they don't really like invite you to do stuff, or like they seem like they're smiling and then when they're around you they're not. You might be a toxic person.
Yeah, I mean, definitely
take this online quiz to find out.
Like, definitely with me it's all about that. Like, just that I've had relationships in the past that were with negative people, and I basically was to the point where I'm like, I just can't handle this. Like, knowing myself and knowing how I struggled with depression in the past, I tell like negative people, like, listen, I get it, you're going through something, but like, I can't live in that space with you, because that's just going to pull me into a dark place, and like, that's not a place I want to be. And I work very hard to be happy and to be positive and to not focus on negatives, because if I do, then I could like spiral back into depression. And it's weird because I haven't really struggled with depression for quite a long time. Like, it's been about 10 years since I've been on any antidepressant type medications, but there are definitely times where you can like feel the cloud starting to hover. Like, it's always sort of there, and you're just like kind of monitoring how thick and dark the skies are going to get. And then when they get too dark, you realize like, okay, something's like happening. I need to change something because I'm like really moving towards this dark place. But I think a lot of people maybe don't have that ability to monitor, or they can't recognize what that is. Right. So that's like where it gets really hard. Yeah. But that's why I'm just like, it's not to be like not empathetic, because I'm very empathetic, but I just know personally, like, I cannot be there. So when I had like a boyfriend who was really negative, I was just like, I can't do this, because you just suck the life right out of me, and like, that's not who I want to be, and I'm not happy with who I am when I'm around you. Yeah. I need someone who can like live in this level with me and build me up. So it is very hard, but it is just about recognizing what you need and helping the people when you can, but then also learning like when you need to detach.
Yeah, and I think if you try to be aware of yourself and try to become a better person, like I recently like kind of stopped drinking, and I think like part of it is just because like
you must be so dehydrated.
Drinking alcohol, because I just like for a long time, for like a couple of years, like every time I get drunk, I realize like, oh, I just regret that.
Embarrassed yourself.
Either I did something embarrassing, or I like hurt one of my friends emotionally or physically, or I just like felt like garbage physically the next day. Like, I was so hungover, and I was like, it's not worth it. And I'm like, why do I keep doing a thing and then every single time saying it's not worth it? Right. When am I going to realize, like, why do you keep doing it? What's your problem with it? So I just kind of realized, like,
yeah, like, that's I'm not going to do a healthy relationship with alcohol if you're constantly regretting drinking.
If every time, and I'm like, what's the point? And for me, like, I don't need it to loosen up. So I'm like,
loosen up, girl.
Exactly. So I was like, I can have a great time and like enjoy myself sober. And I just realized like, and I think I also realized like people were so willing to forgive my bad behavior when I was drunk, and I'm like, but why? Especially because like I would be saying I shouldn't drink so much, or I knew even if I didn't say that, if I'm 31 years old, I'm almost 32, and like I've been drunk before, I should know that I shouldn't drink that much. Right. Like, I should never get to the point where I keep doing these stupid things. Right. And if I do, it shouldn't be like continuously forgivable.
And I think like some of our friends, I mean, I know like there was a time after college where you were like struggling, and you would be really nasty to me when you were drunk, which was like most weekends, and it was just like you would be really hurtful. Physically you'd hurt me, and emotionally you would just say terrible things to me. And then I know like one day I like recorded you, because I was basically like, you need to hear like the way you treat me. And then you would wonder like, why don't you want to come drink with me? And I'm like, because you're terrible to me and I don't want to be around you, and like I love you, but at the same time like these are the things you're saying. And I know like when I played that for you, like it really was kind of a wake up call. Yeah. But of course I was just like, I was at the point where I'm like, I'm not going to say, oh, you were drunk, it's okay, because like you're choosing to get drunk, and I'm telling you every single time you get drunk, you're doing these things, you're hurting me in this way, and I don't want to be around you, and this is why, and like I love you, but if you want us to spend time together, like you need to not be, you know, treating me badly while we're doing it. Yeah. And you kind of realize like, okay, so I think that's like definitely true. And eventually probably most people would be at that same place, but yes.
Yeah, and that's why I try to tell my friends about it, like, and I think you were always like that, like, well, you've said this, and then, like, our one other friend was like, I thought you weren't drinking anymore, like, you weren't drinking as much. Yeah. And, like, was always kind of, like, calling me out on it, but a lot of other friends were just, and I don't know if they do it because they're, like, they want the excuse if they ever do something they feel like they're ashamed of. But I'm just, or they're just
like that.
They just think like
they just kind of think of you as like, that's the one who gets crazy when she's drunk. Like,
yeah. So,
which is like,
but I decided like I don't want to be that person anymore, and I don't need to be drunk.
Healthy and a good decision. But yeah, it's definitely true. Like, I feel the same, yeah, because people will be like, oh, well, he was, like, doing blah, blah, but he was drunk, or, well, she was, like, doing this, and I'm like, okay, well, if you're, like, 21, and it's, like, the first time you got drunk, and yeah, you, like,
or even if you're 40,
yourself.
And it's the first, if it's the first time you got drunk, sure, you don't know what happens.
Or, like, if for some reason, like, every once in a while, like, you get a little too out of control, but yeah, if it's, like, every single time, then it's, like, obviously you just need to stop, because it's not good for you, but, yeah.
And it depends, like, I mean, if it's one thing, like, if you're, like, sick or something and you're just, like, kind of, it's, like, annoying to everybody. Okay, yeah, well, that's like, it's, like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, or
like,
even, like, I know one time, like, I was...
But if you're, like, being a jerk and
I was, like, in college, and I was, like,
whatever.
pretty drunk at this party, and I was, like, embarrassing myself, but I wasn't, like, being nasty to people. I was just, like, being, like, flirtatious and, like, goofy and, like, I don't know, maybe I got in, like, a fight with one girl.
Hogging the pole or something.
Something
whatever
stupid.
You do. Spitting on people.
You know, and it was, like, a friend's cousin or something.
Yeah.
And then I remember the next day I was, like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, I didn't mean to drink that much. And then she was all like, yeah, because you did this and this and this. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm apologizing. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, now I think you're a jerk. Like, I'm trying to say I'm sorry. And, like, you won't just be like, oh, I understand. And I was like, that makes me feel like now you're a jerk and I'm not even really sorry. Because, like, you know, like, I wasn't, like, doing anything. I didn't, like, wreck their house or, like, do anything disgusting or, like, make out with someone's boyfriend or anything. I was just being, like, a goofy, like, I was just really drunk.
And you apologized, and then you probably weren't like that around them again. Like,
right, exactly. And I was like, okay,
it's like, all you can do is try to move forward.
Yeah, I'm like, well, okay, well, now I just think you're a jerk, and I don't even want to be friends with you.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, whatever. What can you do?
But, yeah, so that's how you can tell. So, we had one little story about a parent that we used to know who was definitely, like, toxic and probably borderline abusive.
Definitely abusive.
Definitely, like, emotionally abusive. I don't know if he was physically abusive.
I don't know.
But we were over at the house one day, and the kids they just got home from, like, a picnic, and she wanted to ride her bike, and her helmet was, like, in the trunk, and he was like, it's in the trunk, and then she, like, didn't understand what he was saying or something.
She was, like, looking somewhere else.
And he's like, let's see how stupid she is. In the trunk. In the trunk, and he was like saying her name,
and he was like saying it to us, and we're like, "Why are you?"
Yeah, we're like,
telling
we don't really want to.
I don't want to see how stupid your daughter is. You just seem like a real jerk. That guy was weird, though. Just overall, like his kids were weird. Like one day, I was like there, and they were having lunch, and I was like making them soup, and they were like banging on the table, like, "We want soup! We want soup!" And I was like, "Okay, it's coming!" Like you freaking weirdos. But then, like every time that he would pay us. You know, usually when we would babysit, we would just, like, take the cash and pocket it and, like, count it later because we, like, felt a little awkward, like, counting it right in front. And also, like, we trust the people we babysit for. But he would, first of all, like, make his wife, like, get money out of her purse and then, like, slip it to him so he could pay us. And then he'd be like, don't you want to count it? Don't you want to make sure it's right? And then we'd be like, okay. And then we just, like, never babysat for him again. Because I'm like, you're, like, a real creep. You're, like, nasty to your daughter.
For, like, 3 times or something.
Yeah, we watched him, like, a couple times. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable around these people because... And, I mean, I kind of feel bad. Maybe we should have babysat them more and, like, helped them. But I think definitely one time we'll probably have, like, babysitting stories, too. Because being a babysitter, you see into the lives of people in a way that sometimes I don't even think they realize how much you're getting to know the dynamic of their family.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's interesting, too, especially when you... babysit for people who, like, uphold a certain public image.
Yeah.
And then you see them at home and you're like, oh my god. Like, if only people knew. And that's why I guess, like, babysitter nanny tell-alls are, like, pretty scandalous because people, they just totally forget you're even there. And I'm like...
Because you become, like, a part of the family.
Yeah, but, like, not really. Like, they think you are, and then you're all just like, I'm just here for the money and you people are crazy. Like, I'm just gonna leave now.
You love the kids.
You love the kids, but...
Sometimes.
I don't always love the parents, and sometimes when you babysit, I feel like it's more emotional therapy for parents than it is for kids.
There's
and I'm like,
that's true.
That'll be for another time.
So last week, or I guess, a few, like, I don't remember, some point at this time, we saw the movie After. So it was the hero. How do you say this? Phineas? I don't know. Phineas?
Is it like Ralph?
Like French or something? I don't know. Tiffin. He played Hardin Scott, and this girl, Josephine Langford, played Tessa Young. And then I read a thing that this movie was, like,
based on a
young adult fan fiction of like 50 Shades, which I'm like, okay, but 50 Shades is fan fiction of a young adult book, Twilight, so I don't really understand.
And also, like, ew.
Yeah.
Why would you want to do a teenage fan fiction about, like, a sex book? That's gross.
Sex book?
It's basically like Tina Belcher's, like, friend fiction. Like, that. I don't want to, like, think about teenagers, like, getting into BDSM. That's weird. But whatever.
Anyway, yeah, so it was,
kind of boring.
yeah, it was not good.
Pretty stupid.
It was what it was, what you expected.
Yeah.
It kind of fits on the theme because the guy has this, like, toxic relationship with his dad. His dad was, like, an alcoholic, and then what happened exactly? Like, the mom got murdered?
No, she got, like, raped.
Oh, she got raped.
Basically, like, the dad was, like, an alcoholic, and he would, like, fight with people at bars and stuff. So the one night he, like, fought with, like, these people at a pub, and then they, like, went to his house, but he wasn't there, but the son and the mom were there. So he's like, I tried to stop them, but I was 10, but, like, we weren't home, but they found my mom. So, I mean, I'm assuming she got raped. They didn't, like, say explicitly.
Okay, yeah. So...
And then basically the dad, like, when he moves to, like, America, he, like, rebuilds his life, and he's, like, in recovery, and he's not an alcoholic anymore. Or maybe he is, I don't know. But he's functioning.
I think he's the more
probably.
able.
So he's, like, a chancellor of the college, and he's got, like, a new wife and, like, a huge house, and the son's like, my mom's apartment is falling apart in London, blah, 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 and, like...
There's a good line in the movie that I kind of liked. The girlfriend was like, people can change, and he was like... Clearly, like, he's like, clearly they can, but it doesn't change what happened to us. And I was like, okay, that's true.
Yes, and that's true, and obviously that's, like, a really extreme scenario, but at the same time, like, I think the dad was open to to trying to rebuild something, and if Hardin, I mean, honestly, he just seemed really angsty.
Yeah, whatever.
Like, it's probably legitimate, but he just, like, seemed totally angsty, so.
Yeah, it was weird. And then, of course, so... Spoilers coming, so if you are going to watch the movie, just end the episode now. It's fine. Just follow us on social media and stuff. But basically, you find out... So basically, the way she meets Hardin is, or, like, at this party, and they're playing Truth or Dare or something.
Yeah, and she's like, isn't that a kid's game? And I'm like, oh my god, isn't this writing terrible? Like,
but then she's like, oh, I'll dare you to kiss him. And then she had a boyfriend, so she's like, no, I'm not playing this game. So she, like, leaves. And then he comes and finds her, and then they, like, develop this relationship.
Which also was, like, weird because they met, like, in a room, and they just, like, hover near each other's lips, and then they're, like, in love.
Yeah.
Like,
they didn't really build it up well.
Weird.
Which I think it was a book as well, and I read a review that said, like, they should have built up more because it was, like, really awkward, and then they went to the lake, and they were like,
we're in love! And I'm like, oh, do you even know each other's names? Like, it's very weird.
We can't just be friends, or we can't stop seeing each other, but it's like they bump into each other once, and it was, like, really weird. But anyway, then you find out that he actually, like, they bet him or dared him to, like, get her to fall in love with him. So it's like, he does actually fall in love, but then, you know, the one friend is like, are you going to tell her, or am I going to tell her? And then it just, of course, like, Renee and I both immediately thought of She's All That. And whatever that girl's name was, like, am I a bet? Am I a stupid bet?
You know, it doesn't say stupid. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, seriously? I was just gonna be like, I'm a dare! I'm an effing dare! And just, like, run out into, like, the rain. And I read something once that, like, in movies, when there's big rain scenes, they use milk instead of water because it, like, the milk shows up the water. So then every time I see, like, a big rain scene, I'm, like, just getting soaked in milk. Like, I don't know if it's true, but I'm literally, like, you probably just totally doused in milk right now. Like... Which is pretty gross.
Oh my god.
Maybe it's not true anymore, but I did read that at some point, like, a long time ago. But yeah, so the movie was pretty dumb.
2 thumbs down.
That's pretty harsh. I mean, the writing was bad.
The acting was great.
It's always hard to tell, though, when there's a bad script, if the acting is bad.
That's
like,
true.
But yeah, it was weird. And, like, the characters weren't super likable. Like, they just really weren't. Stupid. Yeah, so I would say not.
And I thought it was weird when the guy was, like, outside, like, after he'd, like, punched whatever, and he was, like, drinking, and then he, like, threw it or something. I was like, and he's like, oh, and then she's like, I'm gonna pick it up, and then she's like, oh, the hand, and I was just like, but why would you bend down and just, like, why don't you just get like a broom or something? Like what?
Well, usually you pick up like the large pieces of
I
glass.
don't know, I guess. But I was just
I was just thinking, like, glass at a pool? Never a good idea. I was like, now next time they go swimming, there's probably going to be a Jack Daniels bottle in their feet.
It was just really weird. He was like, like threw it. I was like, what? Okay. Yeah, anyway, don't go see it. It's not good. I don't even think it's in theaters anymore. It was so bad.
Yeah, so it was called After, in case we didn't say.
And there's a lot of movies coming out.
Yes, we already bought our tickets for Detective Pikachu, which comes out. We're seeing it on Mother's Day. Because it comes out. And I also want to
see a lot of movies coming out. But.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's it for today.
Any final thoughts?
No, I never have final thoughts, Renee, because I wrap things up as I say them.
Oh, okay.
Do you have final thoughts?
No.
What is this, Jerry Springer?
Did they do that on Jerry
Yeah, he always had, like, final thoughts after the episode. Don't you remember?
Not really. I watched Jerry Springer when I was, like, 7, and also, I probably shouldn't have. Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah, no particular final thoughts. Just try to be nice. Don't be toxic. If you are...
If you
probably won't have any friends, so stop.
If you are in a toxic relationship or you have a loved one that's toxic and you want some advice, send us an email.
Yeah.
dearfootsisters@gmail.com and we'll help you. We'll help you through it. You can even come on the show. We can
do
give you a little family therapy.
Oh, yeah. We can bring both on the show.
Yeah.
A little mediation session. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah. If you have an issue you need help working through, we're here to help you.
Check us out.
Write poems.
Check us out on all social media platforms at Dearfoot Sisters. And our website is dearfootsisters.com or facebook.com/dearfeetpodcast. We're the Dearfoot Sisters, and we're prancing away.
Bye, everybody.